No, no, this can't be happening. That's what David said later in court in front of a room full of strangers. His voice shaking like he didn't recognize the life he'd built, collapsing right in front of him. But that's not where this started. It started in my kitchen, at 2:47 in the morning, with 2 screaming newborns and a husband who couldn't stand the sound of his own daughters. I was standing barefoot on cold tile, one baby on each shoulder, both of them crying like their tiny hearts were breaking. Lily's cry was sharp and high. Emma's came in these desperate, breathless bursts. I hadn't slept more than 40 minutes at a time in weeks. The sink was full. Bottles formula, scoops a plate with dried pasta stuck to it. There was a bill on the counter, glowing red under the kitchen light past due. Electric. And then there was David. He stood in the hallway, one hand pressed over his ear like the noise was physically hurting him. "These babies are too noisy," he said. Not yelled, not whispered, just flat, like he was talking about a broken appliance. "I need space." I remember blinking at him. I thought I misheard. What I asked, adjusting Emma as she squirmed and cried harder. He didn't answer me, he just walked past, stepped right over a small puddle of spit up on the floor like it wasn't even there, like none of it was. A minute later I heard the zipper. That sound, I still remember it. I followed him down the hall, both babies still crying, my arms shaking now from holding them so long. David had our bedroom closet open. He was pulling out the navy suitcase. The nice one, the one I bought him for his birthday last year when things were still... okay. "David, what are you doing?" I said. "I told you," he snapped, not even looking at me. "I need space." He grabbed a handful of shirts, didn't fold them, just shoved them in. Then his passport, wallet, charger. Like he'd been thinking about this. Like I was the last to know. "You're leaving?" I asked. It came out quieter than I expected. He finally looked at me then, not at the babies, at me. "Call me when they stop crying," he said. Just like that. No hesitation, no apology, nothing. He rolled the suitcase past me, wheels rattling against the hardwood. I stood there frozen with both babies crying into my shoulders. The front door opened. Closed. And that was it. Silence for half a second. Then Lily let out this piercing wail that cut right through me. Emma followed, louder. I walked back into the kitchen, set them down in their bassinets one at a time, hands shaking so bad I almost dropped a bottle. I remember just standing there after, listening. No car in the driveway, no footsteps, no husband. Just me and 2 tiny humans who needed everything. I laughed. I didn't mean to. It just came out, soft at first, then a little louder. Because what else do you do when your life flips upside down in under 5 minutes? I leaned on the counter, staring at that red bill. "Okay," I said out loud, even though no one was listening. "Okay, David." Emma started hiccuping between cries. Lily's face was turning red. I picked them both up again, one on each side, swaying like I'd done 100 times already that night. "You want space?" I whispered. My voice didn't sound like mine anymore. It was steadier, colder. "I'll give you space." I didn't know how yet. Didn't know what that even meant. But something in me had already shifted. Just a little. Enough to notice. Enough to know this wasn't just about him leaving. This was about what I was going to do next. Now I'm 58 years old, sitting on my front porch in Columbus, Ohio, with a cup of coffee that's actually still hot for once. My daughters are inside arguing about something that doesn't matter in the long run, and I can still hear that night like it just happened. Back then I was 44, married 12 years. Thought I knew the man I'd built a life with. David Mitchell, 47, sales manager, always busy, always stressed, always promising he'd make things better later. "When things calm down," he used to say. They never did, I'd answer. He'd smile like that was just how life worked. Lily and Emma came early, 6 weeks early, both under 5 pounds. Tiny, fragile, always crying, always needing something. The doctors at Nationwide Children's Hospital warned us it would be hard. They were right. But I thought we were in it together. That's the part that gets you. You think you're a team. Until one night you realize you've been playing both sides. That first morning after he left, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room with both girls, one in a swing, one in my arms, flipping between feeding, burping, rocking, checking if they were breathing. The sun came up slowly through the blinds. Everything looked normal outside. Inside it felt like something had been ripped out. I checked our bank account around 7 a.m. I wish I hadn't. The balance was just under $400. I stared at the screen blinking, refreshing it like it might change. It didn't. The savings account gone. I scrolled, transaction after transaction, withdrawals over the past few days. He hadn't just left. He'd planned it. I felt this tightness in my chest. Not panic, not yet. Something colder. More focused. Lily started crying again. Emma followed a second later like they were in sync. I closed the app and set the phone down. Okay, I said again, softer this time. I picked them both up one at a time, settling into the old recliner in the corner. You've got me, I whispered to them. It wasn't a promise I felt ready to make. But I made it anyway. Because at that moment there was no one else. By noon I hadn't eaten. I poured cereal into a bowl, forgot about it, found it soggy an hour later. The house smelled like formula and something sour I couldn't track down. I changed diapers, cleaned bottles, paced the hallway. At one point, I just sat on the kitchen floor at 4:12 a.m. I remember the clock clearly, both babies crying, and I cried with them. Not loud, not dramatic. Just quiet tears running down my face while I held them. Because I didn't know how I was going to do this. And I didn't have time to figure it out. Around mid-afternoon, there was a knock on the door. I almost didn't answer it. But Lily had finally fallen asleep and Emma was quiet, and for a second the house felt still. I opened the door. It was Ruth. She lived next door. 62, widowed, always wore those soft sweaters no matter the season. She looked at me, really looked, and didn't say anything at first. Then she glanced down at Emma in my arms, then past me into the house. You eaten today? She asked. I shook my head. She nodded like she expected that. I made soup, she said, holding up a container. Let me in. I stepped aside. She walked in like she belonged there. Set the soup on the counter, rolled up her sleeves. Give me one, she said, already reaching for Lily in the bassinet. I hesitated for half a second, then handed her over. And just like that, I wasn't alone anymore. That night after Ruth left and the house was quiet again, I sat at the kitchen table. The same red bill still sitting there. My phone next to it. David hadn't called. Hadn't texted. Nothing. I picked up the phone, stared at his name. Thought about calling? Thought about asking where he was, what he was doing, if he was coming back. My thumb hovered over the screen. Then I lowered it. No. Not yet. I leaned back in the chair, closing my eyes for just a second. You want space, I whispered again, more to myself now. I opened my eyes. This time I didn't feel like laughing. I felt clear. Like something had snapped into place. I'll give you space, I said. And I'll figure out what to do with mine. The first thing you learn when you're alone with newborn twins is this time stops meaning anything. There's no morning, no night, just cycles, feed, burp, change, rock, repeat. I stopped checking the clock after a while. It didn't help. But I do remember one moment clearly. It was around 4 a.m. I was sitting on the kitchen floor back against the cabinet, both girls in my arms. Lily had just finished crying herself hoarse. Emma was still going softer now, like she was running out of energy. I hadn't slept. Not really. My head felt heavy, my body worse. And then I started crying too. Not loud, not dramatic, just tears falling while I kept rocking them. I don't know how to do this, I whispered. No one answered. Of course not. But something about saying it out loud made it real. And once it was real, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Later that morning, I bundled them up and drove to Kroger. I don't even remember deciding to go. I just knew we were out of formula and that wasn't something I could put off. The parking lot was half full, ordinary, people walking in and out like it was just another day. I remember thinking how strange that felt. Inside, the air was cold and smelled like bread and cleaning supplies. I grabbed a cart, maneuvered the car seats in, and headed straight for the baby aisle. I stood there longer than I should have. Name brands on one side, store brand on the other. I had coupons, old ones. I knew they were expired, but I still held them like they might magically work. I picked up a can of formula, put it back, picked up the cheaper one. My chest tightened. This is fine, I muttered. It's the same thing. Still, I hesitated. Because when everything else feels like it's falling apart, you cling to the small things. Even the brand of formula starts to feel like a decision that matters too much. Emma let out a cry. sharp, impatient. A woman walking by glanced at me, not unkind, just curious. I took a breath, grabbed the store brand can, and dropped it in the cart. Fed is fed, I said quietly, and kept moving. When I got home, Ruth was waiting on her porch. She stood up the moment she saw me pull in. "You went out," she said, like she was surprised. "Had to," I replied, lifting one car seat out. She walked over, took the other without asking. We carried them inside together. The house still smelled faintly sour, but it was cleaner than the day before. I'd managed to run a load of laundry between feedings. Small wins. Ruth set the carrier down and looked around. "Better," she said. I nodded. She turned to me then, really looked at me. "You talked to him?" she asked. "Number? You going to—" I hesitated. "I don't know," I said honestly. She crossed her arms, leaned against the counter. "Karen," she said, her voice softer now, "men come and go. Money doesn't." I frowned slightly. "What?" She shook her head. "Let me say it better," she continued. "Grief feels loud. Bills are quiet. But the quiet stuff will bury you if you don't pay attention." I stared at her. She wasn't wrong. I checked the account, I said. And almost empty. She didn't look surprised. "Then stop crying on your pillow," she said gently. "Cry on your paperwork." I let out a small breath, almost a laugh. "That's not comforting," I said. "It's not supposed to be," she replied. "It's supposed to wake you up." That afternoon I called Denise. We'd been friends since high school. She'd gone into accounting. Numbers always made sense to her. Unlike people, she picked up on the second ring. "Karen, everything okay?" I almost said yes. Habit. Instead I said no. There was a pause. "Then talk to me." I told her everything, not all the details, just enough. David leaving, the money, the twins. She didn't interrupt, just listened. "Send me your account access," she said when I finished. "Are you sure?" "Yes." So I did. An hour later she called back. "Okay," she said, her voice tight. "I'm going to say this once and I need you to stay calm." That got my attention. "What?" "He didn't just withdraw money," she said. "He cleared out $38,000 from your joint savings." I felt my stomach drop. "All of it?" "All of it." I sat down slowly. "And there's more," she added. Of course there was. He took out a personal loan, $12,000. Looks like it was processed about a week ago. For what? There was a pause. "I'm guessing the trip," she said. I closed my eyes. "So this wasn't impulsive. This was planned." "He set this up," I said quietly. "Yes," Denise replied. I didn't cry this time. I just sat there staring at the wall. "Okay," I said after a moment. "Okay," she repeated. "Yeah." That word again. But this time it meant something different. "What do?" I asked. "First," she said, "you open a new account, only in your name, today." "Okay." "Second, you track everything, every dollar, every receipt." "Okay." "And third," she hesitated. "What?" "You need to talk to a lawyer." My chest tightened again. "I don't know if I'm ready for that." "Karen," she said gently, "he already made a move. You're just catching up." I tried calling a lawyer that evening. I even dialed the number. Let it ring once. Twice. Then I hung up. My hand was shaking. "I can't do this," I muttered. "Not yet." The girls started crying again, almost on cue. I picked them up one after the other. "Okay," I said softly, "not today." The next day the power went out. Just like that. No warning. The house went quiet in a way that didn't feel right. No hum from the fridge, no soft buzz from the lights. I stood in the kitchen holding Emma, staring at the ceiling. "Oh no," I whispered. I checked the bill. Past due. I'd forgotten. Of course I had. I felt this wave of panic rise in my chest. Lily started crying again. Emma followed. Okay, I said quickly, grabbing my phone. I called the electric company, sat on hold, explained, paid what I could. 2 hours later, the lights came back. I stood there watching them flicker on, and I felt embarrassed. But also something else. Awake. Because this was real now. Not just emotional. Practical. Every missed step had consequences. That night after the girls finally settled, I sat at the table again. Phone in front of me. Same number. Lawyer. I took a breath. Dialed. This time I didn't hang up. Law Office of Bennett and Cole, a woman answered. Hi, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. My name is Karen Mitchell. I think I need some advice. 2 days later, I sat across from a man in a small office downtown. Mark Bennett, mid-50s, calm, direct. I told him everything. He listened, took notes, didn't interrupt. When I finished, he leaned back slightly. Mrs. Mitchell, he said, your husband didn't just leave. I swallowed. He abandoned the household, he continued. In Ohio, that matters. I blinked. What does that mean? It means he said you have more leverage than you think. Something shifted again. Not a big dramatic moment. Just a quiet click. Like a door opening. For the first time since David walked out, I didn't feel like I was catching up. I felt like I was standing still. And he was the one who had walked away from something important. That night, I fed the girls, changed them, and sat in the recliner. They were quieter now. Not easy, but manageable. I looked down at them. You've got me, I said again. This time it felt a little more true. And for the first time in days, I didn't feel like I was drowning. I felt like I was learning how to swim. Halfway through the month, my phone buzzed while I was standing in the kitchen, one hand holding Emma the other, trying to scrape something dried and unidentifiable off the counter. I almost ignored it. But something made me look. It was David. Not a call, not a message. A photo. Him standing on what looked like a yacht. Sunglasses on, shirt half unbuttoned, holding a glass of red wine up to the camera like he was toasting someone. Behind him, blue water, bright sun, the kind of sky you only see in postcards. The caption read, "Finally breathing again." I stared at it. For a long second, I didn't feel anything. Then Lily started crying. Emma followed, squirming in my arm. And just like that, the moment snapped in two. I looked down at myself, old t-shirt with a stain I hadn't had time to wash out, hair pulled back in a loose, uneven knot. I hadn't even finished a full cup of coffee in 2 weeks. And there he was, breathing. I locked my phone and set it down. Slowly. Carefully. Because something inside me was shifting again, and this time it wasn't quiet. I carried both girls into the bedroom and laid them in their bassinets. They kept crying. I stood there for a second staring at them. "I'll be right back," I whispered. Then I stepped into the bathroom and closed the door. Just for a minute. Just long enough to breathe. I sat down on the edge of the tub, hands covering my face. And I cried. Not the quiet kind this time. The kind you hold in until it breaks out of you. 10 minutes. Maybe less. I didn't check. At some point I stopped. Wiped my face with the sleeve of my shirt. Took a breath. Another. Then I stood up, looked at myself in the mirror. Red eyes, tired, worn down. But still there. Still standing. No more, I said quietly. No more crying for someone who didn't even think about us. No more waiting for him to come back and fix something he broke on purpose. I opened the door. The girls were still crying. I walked over, picked them up, one then the other. "I've got you," I said. And this time it didn't feel like a question. That night I sat at the kitchen table with a notebook. Not a fancy one, just something I found in the junk drawer. I wrote the date at the top. Then I started writing everything down. Time of feedings, diapers, expenses, every dollar I spent, every message I sent, every call I made. It felt small, but it wasn't. It was control. And I needed that. The next morning I went to the bank. Opened a new account. Just my name. The woman behind the counter smiled politely, asked routine questions. I answered them all. When she handed me the paperwork to sign, I paused for a second. Looked at my name printed there. Karen Mitchell. No second signature needed. No permission required. I signed. And something about that felt steady. Over the next few days, I fell into a different rhythm. Still exhausting. Still messy. But now there was structure. I tracked everything. Saved receipts in a small envelope. Recorded notes on my phone at night when the girls finally settled. I called Mark Bennett again. We talked through the next steps. Temporary custody, he said, and support. We file now, quietly. Will he know I asked? Not yet, he replied, but he will. I nodded even though he couldn't see me. Okay, I said. One afternoon I was sorting through a stack of mail when I found it. A letter from the insurance company. I almost tossed it aside. But something made me open it. I scanned the page once, then again. My stomach tightened. There had been a change to our policy. Effective 3 weeks ago. I didn't fully understand the details not yet, but I knew enough to feel uneasy. I folded the letter carefully and set it aside. Not trash. Not something to ignore. Something to keep. Meanwhile, David kept posting. More pictures, more captions. Different countries, same smile. Wine, beaches, people I didn't know. I stopped reacting. Stopped staring at them longer than a second. If anything, they helped. Because every image reminded me exactly who he was choosing to be. And who I needed to stop waiting for. Money was still tight. But now it was organized. I used what I had access to legally. Paid for what the girls needed first. Doctor visits, formula, diapers. Then small things that made the house easier to live in. I hired a cleaning service once. Just once. 3 hours. It felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. But when I walked into a clean kitchen, counters wiped, floor spotless, I realized something. I hadn't paid for comfort. I had paid for breathing room. And that mattered. Ruth noticed the change. You're different, she said one afternoon, watching me measure out formula. How, I asked. Less lost, she replied. I thought about that. Maybe, I said. She nodded. Good, she added, stay that way. A week later, something happened that I hadn't felt in a long time. Both girls slept. Not at the same time at first. But eventually they did. 6 straight hours. I woke up in a panic, checked them both, made sure they were breathing. They were. Peaceful. Quiet. I stood there for a while just watching them. The room was still. For the first time, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. I leaned down, brushed a hand gently over Lily's head, then Emma's. Mommy's got you, I whispered. And I believed it. 2 days later, an envelope arrived. Official. From the court. I held it in my hands for a moment before opening it. Inside documents. Filing confirmation. Temporary custody request. Support hearing scheduled. I read the date twice. Tuesday. I pulled out my phone, opened my calendar. David's return flight Friday. I stared at the 2 dates. Then I smiled. Just a little. Perfect timing, I said quietly. Because for the first time since he walked out that door, I wasn't reacting to his choices. I was making my own. David came back on a Friday afternoon. I knew because he texted me from the airport like nothing unusual had happened. Landed. Be home in 30. That was it. No apology, no how are the girls, no are you okay? Just a man returning to a house he assumed would still be there waiting for him. Same wife, same mess, same easy place to drop his weight when he got tired of carrying himself. By then the living room was clean, not perfect, lived in, but clean. The baby swings were folded neatly against the wall, bottles were washed and lined up on a drying rack. The diaper caddy was stocked. I had changed into dark jeans and a crisp white button-down shirt I hadn't worn in years. My hair was pulled back in a low knot, a little mascara, nothing dramatic. But I looked like a woman who had slept, even if I hadn't slept enough. The girls were in matching pale yellow sleepers lying in their bassinets near the window, both awake, both calm. Ruth had told me that morning, don't dress for him, dress for yourself. I did. At 3:18 I heard his rental car pull into the driveway. My stomach tightened. Not because I wanted to run to the door. Because I wanted to stay exactly where I was. He came in dragging that same navy suitcase behind him, wheels bumping over the threshold. He smelled like airport air and expensive cologne. Tanned, too, a little thinner maybe, relaxed in that irritating way men look when they've been on vacation while you've been fighting for your life in yoga pants. He took 3 steps into the living room and stopped. His eyes moved around the house. The clean counters, the organized shelves, the new bassinets, the girls, me. What the hell, he said? Not hello. Not how are my daughters. Just confusion, annoyance. I took a sip of coffee, calmly. Welcome back, I said. He looked at me harder then, like he was trying to figure out what was off. Why is everything so He gestured vaguely. What happened here? I set my mug down. I handled things. His gaze snapped to the new rocker in the corner. That wasn't here before. Nope. And those he pointed at the bassinets. The old ones were unsafe. His face changed, not guilt, not concern. Suspicion. Where's my money? There it was. I almost smiled. I leaned back slightly in my chair. I used household funds for household needs, I said. Formula, medical copays, utilities, a cleaner one time. Help when I needed it. His mouth fell open. You what? I handled what you abandoned, David, exactly like you asked. I didn't ask you to spend my money. I stood up then, slowly, not aggressive, just done with sitting. Our daughters needed care, I said. The lights needed to stay on. The mortgage needed to get paid. You left me with less than $400 and 2 premature infants. He scoffed. Oh, come on. You're acting like I disappeared forever. I needed a break. That word. Break. Like fatherhood had been a long meeting. Like marriage was a shift he could clock out of. A break, I repeated. Yes. He dropped the suitcase handle. I was overwhelmed. You were overwhelmed. The house was insane. I couldn't think. I looked at him for a moment. You know what I did when I was overwhelmed, I asked. I kept the babies alive. He flinched, just a little. Then he tried another angle. I sent money. No, you didn't. I was going to, but you didn't. He looked toward the girls then, maybe for the first time since walking in. Lily moved her arms and made a soft little sound. Emma blinked up at the ceiling. Something unreadable crossed his face. Not quite shame, not enough for that. He ran a hand through his hair. This is ridiculous, he muttered. You're overreacting. No, I said. I reacted exactly the right amount. He stared at me. And for the first time in our marriage, I realized something important. He didn't know who I was when I stopped trying to keep him comfortable. That evening, after he stomped upstairs and discovered his closet had been boxed up into neat storage bins in the guest room, he came back down angrier. You moved my stuff? I needed the closet space. You can't just do that. I just did. He laughed once, sharp and humorless. Who the hell do you think you are? The answer came to me so fast it surprised even me. The woman who stayed. He didn't have much to say after that. The hearing was Tuesday morning at Franklin County Family Court. He found out about it Monday evening when the paperwork was served properly and legally right in front of him, while he was standing in the driveway complaining to someone on the phone about domestic drama. I watched from the living room window as the process server handed him the documents. He read the first page, then the second, then looked toward the house. I didn't wave. That night he barely slept. I know because I heard him pacing upstairs, opening drawers, closing them, walking from room to room like motion could solve something that facts had already settled. Tuesday came cold and gray, the kind of Ohio morning where the sky looks like wet concrete. Ruth came over at 7 o'clock to stay with the girls. She looked me up and down as I buttoned my coat. Well, she said approving, he's in trouble. I laughed despite myself. Let's hope the judge agrees. Oh, honey, she said, men like that always think charm is evidence. Mark Bennett met me outside the courthouse carrying a leather folder so full it barely closed. You ready? He asked. No, I said truthfully. He nodded. Good, that means you understand this matters. Inside the courthouse smelled like old paper coffee and winter coats that had soaked up years of bad weather. The benches were polished smooth from use. The fluorescent lights were too bright. Everything about the place said consequences. David was already there with a lawyer, a younger man in a navy suit who looked irritated before we even sat down. David had chosen his court face, somber, respectable, a dark blazer, wedding ring back on. That almost made me laugh. Mark noticed it too. Cute, he murmured. We went in at 9:10. The judge was a broad-shouldered man in his 60s with reading glasses low on his nose, and the patient expression of somebody who had heard every excuse a selfish husband could invent since 1989. He reviewed the file briefly, then looked up. Mrs. Mitchell is requesting temporary full physical custody, temporary child support, and review of financial misconduct, he said. David's lawyer stood first, smooth voice, confident. Your Honor, my client acknowledges that he made an unfortunate personal decision to travel during a stressful period. However, there was never an intent to abandon his family permanently. He simply needed time to regroup. I sat there still as stone. Travel. Regroup? It was amazing what bad behavior could sound like once a man paid somebody to iron it flat. Mark stood. Your Honor, with respect, this was not a spa weekend. Mr. Mitchell left 2 premature 1-month-old infants and his postpartum wife with under $400 in accessible funds after draining their joint savings account. The judge looked over his glasses. Is that accurate? David shifted in his seat. I moved money temporarily, he said. I plan to put it back. When the judge asked. David hesitated. After I got home. The judge wrote something down. Mark continued. We also have documentation of a $12,000 personal loan taken out the week before departure used for the European trip. David's lawyer tried to object to tone. The judge waved him off. Sit down, counselor. I can hear perfectly well. Then Mark handed up my notebook. It looked small in his hands, plain, spiral-bound. But it held my month. Every feeding receipt, late payment notice, pediatric visit, sleepless night, and bank balance. The judge flipped through several pages in silence. Mark said, if the court would like, page 14 contains a representative comparison from February 14th. The judge found it. Mark read aloud. Mr. Mitchell, Rome restaurant, charge $403.18. Same date infant fever medication for Lily Mitchell, $22.47. Same date emergency utility payment to restore service, $186. The room went still. Even David's lawyer stopped moving. Mark didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He just kept going. Page 19. Santorini excursion, charge $287. Same week pediatric follow-up at Nationwide Children's. Page 23. Premium wine purchase in Florence. Same day store brand formula at Kroger. I looked straight ahead. David shifted again. This is misleading. The judge looked up. In what way? I was under pressure, David said. I needed to clear my head. That doesn't mean I don't love my children. The judge's face didn't change. Love is not under review this morning, Mr. Mitchell. Conduct is. That landed. Hard. David swallowed. Then Mark said, there is one more issue, Your Honor. He handed up the insurance letter. My heart started beating faster even though I already knew. Mark continued. 3 weeks before leaving for Europe, Mr. Mitchell made changes to the family insurance policy that resulted in both infants losing medical coverage. David turned sharply. That's not what happened. Mark didn't even look at him. We contacted the provider yesterday. We have confirmation. David's lawyer jumped in this time. Your Honor, my client may have misunderstood the forms. The judge cut him off. Did the babies have active coverage, yes or no? Silence. Then David said very quietly, no. You could feel the room change. Even the clerk behind the bench looked up. The judge set the papers down with careful precision. Mr. Mitchell, he said, each word clipped and clear, you left premature infants without adequate financial support and without medical coverage while vacationing abroad. David opened his mouth. The judge lifted a hand. No, you've said enough. He turned to the paperwork again. Then he ruled. Temporary full physical custody to me. Temporary child support set at $1,800 a month effective immediately. Mandatory parenting classes for David. Financial review to continue. He paused, then looked directly at him. This court does not reward parents who disappear during the hardest month of their children's lives. David had gone pale. Actually pale. His lawyer leaned toward him and whispered something, but David wasn't listening anymore. He was staring at the bench like the floor had opened under him. Then, in a voice so low I almost didn't hear it, he said, no, this can't be happening. There it was. Not the words themselves, the shock. The raw disbelief of a man who had spent his whole life assuming consequences were for other people. He turned toward me then. Karen, please. I looked at him. Really looked. At the expensive watch, the forced humility, the fear finally breaking through. And I felt nothing dramatic. No triumph, no rage. Just clarity. I turned to Mark and picked up my coat. We're done here, I said. Then I walked out. In the hallway, my legs felt weak all at once. Mark touched my elbow lightly. You did well, he said. I nodded, but I couldn't speak for a second. Not because I was falling apart. Because I wasn't. That was the strange part. After all that noise, all that panic, all that pain, peace arrived quietly. And it sounded like my own footsteps leaving the courtroom without looking back. It's funny what quiet feels like after you've lived inside noise for so long. Not just the crying, not just the chaos. I mean the kind of noise that sits in your chest, the constant tension, the waiting, the wondering what someone else is going to do next. When that disappears, it doesn't feel loud. It feels like space. Real space. The kind you can finally breathe in. I'm sitting on my front porch as I tell you this. Columbus, Ohio, early fall. The air's just cool enough that you want a sweater in the morning, but not by noon. I'm 58 now. Back then, I was 44, exhausted, scared, and learning everything the hard way. Inside the house, you can hear faint voices. My daughters. Lily and Emma. They're 14 now. 14. Sometimes I still can't believe that. They're arguing about something homework, I think. Or music. It changes every week. Their voices overlap, a little sharp, a little dramatic. Normal. Healthy. Alive. I take a sip of coffee, it's still hot. That used to feel impossible. The first few months after the hearing weren't easy. People think once the judge rules, everything just settles into place. It doesn't. There's paperwork, follow-ups, adjustments, more nights where you're tired than you want to admit. David paid support, eventually, sometimes late, sometimes with complaints attached. He went to the parenting classes, I know because the court required proof. We spoke when necessary. About schedules, about the girls, nothing more. There wasn't a big dramatic final conversation. No apology that fixed everything. Just distance. The kind that grows naturally when two people stop pretending they're on the same side. I went back to work slowly. Not full-time at first. Just bookkeeping for a small local business, a hardware store over on High Street. The owner, Frank, didn't ask a lot of questions. He just needed someone reliable. I could do that. Numbers made sense. They didn't change depending on someone's mood. They didn't walk out the door. I worked during the girls' naps at first, then during preschool hours, then more as they got older. Over time, it built into something steady. Not flashy, but mine. We moved into a smaller house about a year later. Nothing big, 2 bedrooms, a small yard, a porch just wide enough for a couple of chairs. It felt right. Manageable, safe. Ruth came with us in a way, not physically, but she stayed in our lives. She still calls every Sunday. Still asks if I'm eating enough. Still gives advice I don't always want but usually need. You did good, she told me once a few years after everything. I did what I had to, I replied. She shook her head. No, she said. You chose yourself, that's harder. I didn't argue with her. David, well, he's around. In the way some people are. He shows up when it's his time, takes the girls out for lunch, brings them back with stories about places he's been or things he's done. They listen, sometimes they roll their eyes. They're old enough now to see things clearly. I don't fill in the gaps. I don't need to. Life does that on its own. A few months ago, Lily came home from school and dropped her backpack on the kitchen floor. I think I want to be a lawyer, she said. I looked up from the counter. Really? She nodded. Yeah, like the one you had, the one who helped you. Mark Bennett. I smiled a little. That's a good job, I said. Emma walked in right behind her. I don't want to argue with people all day, she said. I like numbers. I laughed. Of course you do. She grinned. I'm serious, maybe accounting or finance. I leaned back against the counter looking at both of them. 2 girls who started life so small, so fragile. Now standing there confident enough to talk about futures that felt real. You know what matters, I said. They both looked at me. Whatever you choose, I continued, make sure you can stand on your own 2 feet doing it. Emma nodded right away. Lily tilted her head. You mean like you, she asked. I paused. Yeah, I said, like me. Sometimes late at night when the house is quiet again, but a different kind of quiet, I think back to that night in the kitchen. The crying. The mess. The way everything felt like it was closing in. And I think about the version of me standing there holding 2 babies and trying to understand how her life had changed so fast. I wish I could go back and tell her something simple. Not something dramatic. Just this: you're going to be okay. Not because someone comes back and fixes it, but because you learn how to hold it together yourself. People like to use the word revenge. I get it. It sounds satisfying. Clean. Like there's a moment where everything balances out and the other person finally understands what they did. But that's not how it felt. What I did wasn't about hurting David. It was about not letting what he did define the rest of my life. It was paperwork, phone calls, decisions made when I was tired and scared but made them anyway. It was choosing to stand up even when sitting down would have been easier. And over time that adds up. He wanted space. I gave him all the space in the world. And somewhere in the middle of that, I found mine. If you've ever been the one holding everything together while someone else walked away, I see you. You don't need a dramatic moment to take your life back. Sometimes it's just one decision at a time. I'll see you in the next story.